All right, yes, I think if there's questions from the board, now would be appropriate time.
Now, this is new construction. Why can't they just design a pool and deck area that fits within the boundaries that we already have established?
Unfortunately, Mr. Chair, with the applicant not here, I'm not at liberty to answer that because I don't have an answer. That's a good question, though. That it would appear that there is ample room to do that, and it is new construction. So,
Looking at their scale drawings, if they moved the pool over 10 feet, they'd have the same design. It fits right there on the setback line.
Yes, Mr. Chair, it does appear that there's ample room to comply with the setbacks, and unfortunately, without the applicant being here, and applicant has not specifically addressed why they need to move it over. I think it's just a matter of they want to line it up with the back of the house is the impression I got, and from the drawing that they provided, rough drawing they provided, looks like that's kind of the intent of what they're trying to do, and maximize the remainder of their usable rear yard. But don't really have a good answer as to why they can't shift it over and stay within the setbacks.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Conrad.
Yeah, I was going to ask the same question that Walt did, but the applicant not being here makes it difficult to prove what you have to prove to get a variance. You have to prove that it's a unique situation. It's not like everybody else, and it's providing you a hardship. If the applicant was there, I'd say, what hardship is it providing you? And maybe they could convince us. But without the applicant being here, I don't see anything, like Walt says, you move it 10 feet to the right or design it a little differently. Other people in the neighborhood have designed their pools to fit within the setbacks. And we make pretty much everybody in town comply with the setbacks unless you come to us with some really unique reason or prove that it's a hardship or something that makes you different from other people. But I can't ask those questions, so I can't recommend to the Board of Adjustment that they do it. I would tell the applicant, it's going to, if it were my choice, it's going to go forward to the Board of Adjustment without planning and zoning, or without my vote as part of planning and zoning. But they could show up at the Board of Adjustment and maybe convince the City Commission. But I don't think we would be doing our due diligence to the Commission to vet this thing for them, to just say, hey, we don't know why. And staff should have brought to us a reason why. And staff should have asked the people, why are you doing this? Because that's the whole crux of the variance thing, is the uniqueness and hardship. We don't have anybody saying that there's anything unique or hard about designing a pool that would fit within the limits.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Thomas, when they made the application, did they present any kind of special conditions or circumstances?
Not when I spoke with them, no. It was, given the size of the remainder of the lot, really was the primary consideration, that they were trying to make it fit within the design of what they want to do with their backyard, really. I was not given any information about a hardship per se.
Okay.
Other staff had a conversation with them that talked about a hardship, yeah. So, and as Board Member Conrad pointed out, I mean, that is the basis of our code that related to variance approvals, is that there's either something unique about the property or the configuration or something not of the making of the applicant that caused the issue where they need to request a variance. And as you pointed out, there doesn't appear to be one here. It is new construction. There appears to be, based on the sketch they provided, ample opportunity to shift things. And so it's there doesn't appear to be a hardship per se. And it don't even, when you look at the aerial, there aren't even any trees on the lot to say, well, there's a special tree or something that they want to save. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, as I look through the criteria for the variance, if I was being liberal, I could make up 3 of the 6 issues, but that was, being generous in some cases. Any other discussion? think at this point we need with the applicant not being here, any other comments from staff?
No, sir, the only option, other than to move it forward with the recommendation for denial or approval with conditions, would be to table it time certain and give the applicant another shot at coming in. It'd be the next Planning and Zoning Board meeting, which would be a month from today.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
did the applicant give a reason why they weren't here tonight?
And as
They
we have had
communicate with you?
communication. No, sir, would they?
Be interested in Mr. Marlowe's opinion from the commission standpoint. Would you rather have us send it to you, to the commission, without a recommendation and let you guys figure it out from scratch? Or would you rather we table it and see if the applicant is serious about wanting to get this variance?
Well, maybe, Mr. Mayor, before you answer that, maybe we should officially close the public hearing so we can enter into deliberation. So that will close the public hearing. Mr. Conrad, ask your question now.
Now, under deliberations, the same question.
I think with the absence of the applicant here tonight, I think the proper thing, I've agreed with everything that's been said here tonight. I would recommend that the P&Z not recommend approving this variance if the applicant chooses to move forward with it and shows up at the Board of Adjustment. Then maybe the applicant can make the pitch at that point in time. If the applicant had communicated with staff a reason that they weren't going to be here tonight, then my opinion may be differently. But if you don't show it, they may have changed their mind and just forgot to withdraw the application. I'd hate to table it and put staff through everything all over again and
Renoticing.
renotice all that stuff
Yeah.
again. So
That's a good point.
Mr. Chair, just a point of order. If we table at time certain, we wouldn't have to advertise or do more mail-outs. The notification at the meeting of time certain is adequate for notice.
Okay.
Just
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion at this time, if it's appropriate.
Yeah, I think if there's not any other discussion, well,
Do we know when they're supposed to start construction on that lot?
that house is already under construction.
already under
Yeah, there's
construction.
already a physical structure there.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, did we officially ask for public comment? I know we probably don't have any, but just to make sure we cover that base.
We did ask,
Okay.
yeah. Okay. All right. Mr. Boyer, would you like to proceed with your motion?
I would like to make a motion to forward a denial to the city commission regarding this issue.
All right, there's a motion for denial for application V 18-02. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second. It's actually, we're recommending denial.
Yes,
It's not-
sorry, recommending.
Recommending.
There's a motion to recommend denial for application V 18-02. So it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All right. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. So the application then will be first heard by the Board of Adjustment on April 23rd, 2018. Is that correct date?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that'd be April 23rd.
All right. All right. Agenda item, topic from members for discussion. We'll start with Mr. Conrad.
None?
Mr. Boyer.
Yeah, I'm going to steal the mayor's thunder here just for a second. Yesterday was the start of our water challenge, Save the Water Challenge. I'm proud to say that I took the challenge. I encourage everybody else to as well. It's really a great thing to do to make sure that our kids and the following generations are able to enjoy clean water and our springs and our lakes and everything that water has to offer. I'm done.
Ms. Laird. I too have taken the challenge, and so it will now stimulate me to fix my leaking tub. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I also took the challenge, and I've got a couple leaky faucets, so, yeah. Guess I'll be fixing those.
Well, thank you all for taking the challenge. It does make you feel guilty when you look around and you say, man, I've been meaning to get to that. For those of you who don't know, appreciate you, Board Member Boyd, for bringing it up. We are involved in the National Windlands Mayor's Challenge to Conserve Water. I'm happy to report that all 3 of the schools have partnered with us. We're off to a great start on that. It's a fun way to protect the environment. You know, most of us here in Newberry, we live out in the rural areas because we like to live in the environment. We enjoy the environment. We partake of it in it on a daily basis. But we do have a different way of going about protecting the environment. I think friendly competitions like this inspire us to do things in a friendly way, and it's much more productive than regulations and laws and ordinances and those kinds of things. So I'm hopeful that everybody can go. It doesn't take about 3 minutes. It's mywaterpledge.com. And I encourage you, I've issued a personal challenge to Mayor Harris over there in Archer. So it's Newberry versus Archer. But no matter where you live, it's a good thing to do. And when you take the pledge, again, it only takes about 3 minutes, you can click that you want to be entered into the drawing, and then it will give you an option to nominate a local charity. There's 5 categories of cities. If we win our category, then Newberry's name will go into the hat with the other 4 cities. They'll pull one city, and that city will win for the charity that was nominated by the citizens, will win a brand new 2018 Toyota RAV4. So every citizen can nominate any charity that you would like. The students voted to push for Tin Can, which is a local charity that supports our veterans and first responders. So they don't come up in the automatic registry, so you have to type them in underneath. So Tin Can, it's the number 10, no hyphen, C-A-N, can. Tin Can. I would certainly appreciate if you'd consider taking the pledge, nominating them. It's fun, it's friendly, it's a good cause, so I appreciate the support. That'll do it for me.
Anybody else?
Mr. Chair, just want to remind everybody about Westfest, Newberry's 2nd annual Westfest. It's going to be Sunday, April 15th, starting at 1 p.m. till 8 p.m. We've got a bunch of musical acts, and it's going to be a lot of fun and a great activity. So everybody, please come out.
I've actually heard him on the radio. All right. With that, we will adjourn the Planning and Zoning meeting. Fifth, 2018 meeting. Old business is an update on the state certified local government historic preservation board training. New business is an application CA 18-01, request by Sheila K. Smith, agent for Edward D. Jones, for placement of a canopy awning, hanging blade sign, and a wall sign, identifying the Edward Jones office name. Point B under new business is the discussion of the possible text for the HARB initiated amendment to the land development regulations regarding the certificate of appropriateness, review and approval process, topics from members for discussion, and adjournment. Do I have a motion to approve the
So
agenda?
moved.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed. All right. If you've had a chance to review the minutes from Monday, February 5th. All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, minutes are approved. Our old business is an update on the state certified local government historic preservation board training. Ms. Wendy.
Good evening. Are we on? We're on. Remember, we've been talking about training for historic preservation and the certified local government that's offered through the state. And I talked with them. They've just hired their new guy who's taken over the CLG program. And I asked about what we had talked about, doing the training in an evening. So it's after work for those who do work, and from like 6 to 8, as opposed to a long whole day thing and having to take up a weekend day or something. So the dates we have, they're doing training with the new person during the month of May. So June will be the best time when they would be able to come over and do the training. And the dates are, what's best for them is a Thursday. Now, and any Thursday night during the month of June, so the 7th, the 14th, the 21st, or the 28th. So I wanted to get some feedback from you if that was going to work for June.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Mayor.
I would only reiterate the point we made last time that 3 of our sitting P&Z members are running for the commission. Might be better to table picking the date until we flush that out, or I mean, you guys certainly go ahead and move someone and dictate it to whoever comes onto this board, but if they can't make it,
I would probably suggest, making that decision at the next,
the next P&Z meeting when we
or the next.
kind of
board
have an
meeting.
idea of
Yeah.
who's going to be up
We'll
here.
know the makeup at that point.
I mean, we won't replace everybody by that point, but at least we'll know kind of what's in front of us.
Okay, we would end up wanting to wait then because they will not be able to schedule it, with the state requirements for scheduling in the travel and that kind of thing. So if we wait till the May meeting, it's difficult for the June dates, even though it's the beginning of May.
Do they have
Um,
July dates available?
July doesn't work for
Okay.
them. So if you would like, I can check with
It would
them
probably
on
be
August
better
and
to
we'll wait. and-
Push it a little bit because sometimes it takes a little while to get
get going.
applications out and get new people seated.
Okay.
I'll work with staff in the interim to find out, or do we have some applications that are there? Are we going to be approaching residents and asking them to come and join, depending on what happens?
Okay.
So I just think there might be some question marks that we want to fill in before we lock down a date that might. It's kind of embarrassing when you bring somebody all the way up here and only 2 people end up being able to show up.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't want that. And we're going to open this up to the public as well. So I'm happy to do that, let them know. They were just trying to get a date on the books. And I understand with the election that if you'd prefer, we'll be glad to wait and we'll try it again.
Yeah, we've been at this for a while, trying
Yeah.
to schedule this date, and between the state and our own personal agendas, it's been difficult at best for you.
Okay. All right, well, that's fine. I will let them know, and then we'll just tell them that we will let them know probably next month or the month after so that we get an idea what's going on after the election. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, we will move on to new business. It's application CA 18-01, a request by Sheila K. Smith, agent for Edward D. Jones, Kenneth A. and Deborah W. Busser, owners, for a certificate of appropriateness to allow placement of a canopy awning sign, a hanging blade sign, and a wall sign identifying the Edward Jones office name, located at 25349 West Newberry Road. Tax parcel 02213-000-000 within the Newberry Historic District. The following provides the property's legal description: original Newberry plat book A129A W46 FT of Lot 5, Block 32, or 3056/516. So at this point, we will hear from the applicant.
Actually, I'd like to amend that a little bit. I can't get Edward Jones to approve the blade sign, so I'm requesting the awning. The wall sign actually has been there. all
Mr.
the way
Chair?
forever.
Yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I would consider this a quasi
Okay.
judicial because we're making a decision on a specific application. So if you wouldn't mind reading our
Absolutely.
procedure again, thank you.
All right, so, since this is a quasi judicial meeting, all public testimony will be taken under oath. Everyone testifying will be subject to cross-examination. All documents and exhibits shall be entered into evidence. The giving of opinion testimony is limited to experts, and closing arguments will be limited to the evidence of record. The procedure we will follow this evening is that we will first hear from the applicant with no time limit. The applicant will then be subject to cross-examination by the board. Staff will then enter the staff report into the record and answer questions. The applicant will have the opportunity for rebuttal of any testimony against the applicant. We will open the floor for public comment, limited to 5 minutes each. And then the applicant will have an opportunity for closing arguments. The public hearing will be closed, and the commission will enter into deliberations. We will now administer the oath. If you will raise your right hand. Do you hereby swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Thank you, ladies. Yep.
Sorry,
Yeah.
if any member of the board has any ex parte communication on this application CA 18-01, now would be the time to disclose it on the record.
I don't.
I don't.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, Ms. Smith, now you may proceed. Thank you.
The wall sign actually has already been up for at least 10 years, because I worked in the Newberry office for a while in 2008, and it was there then. I don't have the dimensions for that right now, but I can get them from my home office and supply them to you later. But, so all I'm requesting is the awning, which, from what I understand, is the feel and the look that y'all want for the historic district, 1920s feel with awnings and that, which benefited me because I worked Jones also stopped doing awnings, but because I'm in the historic district and that's what I was told y'all would like, they green lighted it.
All right. This would be the opportunity now for board members to ask any questions, Ms. Smith?
Ms. Smith? Oh, go ahead, Bill.
Mr. Chair, what color is the awning going to be?
Edward Jones green and then
Okay.
white lettering.
And I would ask staff, how do we know if the color they picked is from the palette of colors that were acceptable to historic district?
Mr. Chair, the colors, we don't have an adopted palette of colors per se that are official that we hold the district to. We do look at the general design and what's been there, but we don't have an official adopted palette.
So it just kind of goes by our opinion if we think that was a color that was popular?
It's been, it's been looking at whatever the historic buildings have looked like, looking at old pictures, looking at, of course, most of them are black and white. So, but it's not been adopted, and we are looking at bringing some other amendments forward and including some of those kinds of things. But it's a matter of whether the commission is interested in having how detailed those requirements are going to be for the historic district and what we're going to hold people to as they do these changes. So it is something to think about, but for now, we looked at, they're already, the awning that's there is sort of already there, which I'll show you a couple pictures. But
You got one right next to it that's pink,
Yeah, and then you have that green thing
that
that's,
hard shell thing.
yeah, that's there now.
But it's not, it isn't really, isn't it like the frame of an awning that there's supposed to be
Yeah,
more
so-
to it, or is
But
that?
it makes you think that maybe the green, the green was supposed to be there. I don't know if someone else has, memory of any of that kind of stuff, how it was, or pictures they have seen.
Yeah.
But in our review of looking at that, we felt that we could support the green color for that location.
Right next to the pink, that, you think that would?
Don't you like green and pink? It's very preppy.
Eh,
Very Florida, there.
yeah. South Florida.
Chair.
Yes,
Oh,
Mr. Boyer.
you were going to say something. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say other questions from
Oh,
Ms.
okay.
Smith.
Is he not trying to harp on the color, but the green is going to be basically the same color green that's already out there, correct? Isn't it very similar, very close?
It's close.
Okay. And the wall sign's been up there a long time. Are they planning on replacing that
2008.
one?
I hadn't requested that, but if that's what the city would like. Edward Jones tries to be as cooperative, and we want to be a good member of the community. So that's why they gave me the green light for the awning. I'm sure if I told them that the city was requesting that that sign be updated, that it wouldn't be a problem.
Okay. The only reason I ask is it was in the initial request, but I just didn't know if they were updating it, or changing the sign, or were their intentions just to get authorization to keep the sign up there?
I believe just keep the sign. Nothing's been brought up.
Okay.
It would be brought up by me because this all goes against my P&L. But I would, if the city would like it updated, because I'm sure it's pretty weathered, I'd be happy to replace it with one just like it, but fresher.
Weathered adds to that historic.
True. Good. I like that answer.
So you can see on this picture there,
There it
it
is.
shows, and then the one that goes before, so this is what's there now.
Mr. Chair, the folks at home have a hard time to hear, so if we could all talk into the mic
Oh,
to
Yeah.
keep
sorry.
it on the record there.
Well, at this point, Wendy, let's
I can
let's
go
finish
first.
with the applicant
Okay.
first, and then we'll let the staff enter in the report, and then we can get into all that minutia. Any other questions for Ms.?
I'm done.
All right. Any other questions? All right, yeah, you can have a
Thank
seat,
you.
and we'll invite up Miss Wendy, and then she can enter the staff report.
Mr. Chair, Wendy Kinzer, Principal Planner for the City of Newberry. Please consider that the application and the packet that you have is entered into the record. The staff recommendation that you have in your packet is based on originally getting the idea of the 3 signs being requested. As Ms. Smith indicated, the 1 sign that's there already, that's been there for several years, the one that's above the awning, you can see it in this location as well, where they show the actual property, sorry, the sign. Okay, so when looking at the property where we're proposing the sign, you can go to the east or the west. Let me start over. Okay, regroup. Here we go. Okay. Now, this application that's before you is just for the awning sign, and that is in the resolution that's being recommended by staff. And in that also it mentions the 2 other signs. So if you were to choose to approve this particular awning sign, you can do so with the indication that you're deleting those other 2 mentionings of the other types of sign, which this originally was they were talking about the blade sign, hanging blade sign, and then the wall sign and the awning sign. So there are 3 attached signs that would be considered. So we're no longer considering a blade sign. We're just looking at the awning sign and looking at the existing sign that's there that says, the name of the office as well. And that's been there, but it's something that you consider because you're adding another sign through the awning sign. The recommendation, staff, is for approval of that particular awning, but as Mr. Conrad was saying, looking at the types of things that you would approve for a historic district, the colors, the type, the font, those kinds of things are all things that you would consider. But in looking at what our requirements are and the kind of regulations we have in our existing code, we are limited on how specific we can actually say you've got to do this. But as a board, you can decide that your recommendation, your approval, if they want it, would be based on things that you know as far as with the Secretary of Interior standards or the information that we're going to be learning about when we do the training, and how we can beef up that ordinance. But at this point, our ordinance specifies if you're changing the exterior and the public can see that, then you want to consider, is it consistent with the area? Is it consistent with that district? So when we look at the property and the adjacent buildings and those kinds of signs, it's a matter of whether you think it's something that you want to see in our historic district. This one will not be included, but you've got, this is the one that's proposed. this is Edward Jones standard font that they use and the type of the colors that they use. So if it were to be different, I don't know how that would work with them. But the recommendation that you have and the resolution that you have before you for your approval is for approval.
Mr. Mayor.
Wendy, is that to scale? It looks awfully bulbous and like it
Yeah.
sticks out much further than the other. Is that just an optical illusion because we
I
kind of
think it is.
tacked it on there?
Right, because
Okay.
the applicant provided that as the way to show, kind of give you an idea of how it would be. But we do have dimensions. Those are in the packet that are shown as provided by the applicant, and those dimensions are, let's see.
36
You see those with the, I put those, we've got 69 for the, 69 inches for the height, 36-inch depth, and then 108.5 across, the length of the storefront. So,
Can you give us any perspective as how big Sugar Refine's canopy is and Country Kitchen's canopy in terms of, I guess, how far, the width that it sticks out, how, relation to 36 inches for the applicant, is the Sugar Refined and Country Kitchen approximately that same width, do we know?
it appears it's going to look bigger and it's going to have a wider depth, but I can't tell you. Okay, never mind.
I was just going to give this to you. Yes, yes, because that.
Please step up to the mic.
Oh,
It's all right.
okay. This is what was sent to me from my home office today, and it's smaller than what that appears to be. So may I pass it around? Is
Yes.
that acceptable?
Start with Ms. Grant.
So it's a lot narrower.
Okay.
Can we have this copy for our records? Thank you. While everyone's looking at the picture, I'll just say that we just went through our own economic development logo, and the consulting company that we use was very adamant that once you have a color scheme and a font and a look, you never mess with it. So yeah, I would just anticipate if we went back to Edmund Jones and said we don't like the font, they'd probably object to that part of it, because that's what they put across the board.
Right. Yeah, I guess I would not be keen on making somebody change their national logo, and certainly that presentation with a less wide or less linear frontage is a lot more palatable.
Mr. Chair, question for Ms. Smith, if she's still up there? Is she still able to talk? or-
If we're done with Ms. Kaiser, with Wendy, then
Okay.
we can bring the applicant back up for rebuttal or testimony.
Are they, home office, would they be agreeable to using a smaller font instead of such a in-your-face font? I mean, same font, I don't want to
Same
change
font,
their
but
image or their
smaller.
brand, but just smaller.
I
Would they be able to
believe
reduce
that
the
they
scale of
would.
that?
I believe that they would, as long as the font was the same, the scale was down. Again, that they do their best to be a good neighbor and to be a member of the community, so I believe that they'd want to cooperate.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
The depiction
Ms. Mayor.
that you've presented to us tonight just covers the door, and
Yes, sir.
the depiction that staff has covers the entire thing. It's the depiction that you
That's-
have.
That's the one that
Is
was
the updated
approved by
change.
Edward Jones to use.
Okay. So, Madam Attorney, we've changed the request from the sign ordinances. We've changed the request for the canopy. Are we still in the same meeting?
Yes.
Okay, so we haven't changed things substantially enough to say that we need to
Right, you can continue with
Okay.
approval
Okay.
of this.
And to me, it would appear with this change in linear length that, at least from that picture rendering, that the font size becomes a little more palatable in terms of not quite so big as opposed to what was a 108 linear inches.
You have to realize you're going through town, so
It's
it's hard to see if you bring it smaller down. It wouldn't be recognizable, because you can't,
Yes, ma'am. That,
going through town, you can't look at the sign and also look at the traffic going around you to keep from running over people.
that was why I requested, I worked in this office back in 2008, and people kept saying what a hard time they had finding me, even with that big sign
Right.
on the front. And now that I'm back, I'm still getting that 10 years later of being in the community, people saying, I didn't know there was an Edward Jones there. And so that's why I started this, to try to get the awning and better signage.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
is there, I know the depiction is different from the one that is right in front of me, but is there room with it being 69 inches tall for it to still be under the Edward Jones sign? Or will the sign need to be,
They came out and measured.
They did?
Yes, ma'am.
okay, thank you.
Other questions for Ms. Smith?
I had one more question.
Mr. Conrad?
Yes, sir.
Do you plan on painting the front of the building as well?
I'm renting. I'm not sure if the landlord is. I would like it painted.
Would be nice. Sugar Refined is freshly painted, and you got Backyard Barbecue right down there doing a lot of fixing up, and I'm real
Thought
excited
about
about
ask-
how much better that part of town is going to look.
I thought about asking Jamie when he had the bucket truck if he'd just come down and
Yeah,
do my
that's what I
front.
was thinking. They got it out there. Boy,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be much of a project, and that's outside of the scope of this. But if you could maybe bring that back to your company, someone on the board said they'd really love it if
I
you would paint
certainly
that,
will, 'cause
because
I
it would
would
be in
too.
keeping with what's going on in town. It's exciting what's happening in our downtown, and I'm really thrilled that you are trying to fix up the front of your office, and it needs fixing up. And,
Yes,
I think a coat of paint would really do wonders for that, too.
yes.
I think maybe Deborah would do it if you said, hey, the board was recommending that,
Okay.
that we repaint.
Only an awning
You're
that
spending
big.
money on an awning, you don't want to put it up
Yeah.
on a wall, it doesn't look good. So,
Yeah, and maybe if I offered to split it with her even, but,
We'll
Right.
confirm
yeah,
that.
I'll do that.
Ms.
Mr.
Smith?
Chair.
On
Yes.
this resolution, it still says 108 linear inches.
Okay. That I'm not sure.
So-
Unfortunately, I am
Mr.
your
Chair.
typical woman when it comes to inches and feet.
I think that what happened was in the initial submittal that they made, they just took a ballpark when they tried to scale it, but now they've actually come out and measured it, and the 108 was accurate all along. It's just that that's the actual scale of 108 versus the original depiction, which they had not measured at that point. And so the measurement may not have changed, but the scaling on the photo is what's changed. They actually have an accurate scaling now of what the actual awning will look like.
Okay.
Everybody
Mr.
get-
Chair, yeah, it's still only 9 foot long, so.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I
Mr.
just
Mayor.
reiterate those thoughts about the painting while they have that down. I think it'd look a lot better. And do you need the other sign once you have that big Edmund Jones? The one on the top, I think, is going to be dwarfed. Does it have more information that you feel is vital to it, or is it kind of you're saying
Not
Edmund
at
Jones,
all.
then Edmund Jones?
Yeah.
It's just a thought.
Yes.
I think the Edmund Jones canopy is going to catch your eye and get your
I
attention.
have
and
no problem bringing it down, because like I said, it has gotten weathered, and over the last 10, 11 years, I'd be happy to do that.
Might take it down and paint behind it, and then you can make a judgment about whether you want to replace it or just I always want to let businesses, if you feel like it's vital for you to have two signs that say it, we'll consider it. But seems to me the new canopy is going to be the centerpiece, and that's what you're going to want the eye drawn to. So if we could paint behind it and make it, give it a fresh look, I'm sure that canopy is probably fairly expensive, a lot more expensive than a couple cans of paint. So.
And as a historical item, you can always put it in your window.
All right, any other questions for Ms. Smith? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, we'll open the floor up to public comment, if there is any. All right. Seeing no public comment, Ms. Smith, would you like to make a closing argument? Okay.
Thank you for your time and consideration.
All right, at this point, the public hearing will be closed, and we will enter into deliberations. Any additional comments, questions, or just comments from the board?
I like the idea. I'd like to be able to take the old sign off the wall and use that awning as their marquee signage. I'd like to see the text that they're using maybe in a single line instead of overlapping. I mean, most of their branding is single lined. That might reduce the size, but it would still be visible.
Wouldn't that be changing their logo if you did that?
No, I mean, what they presented right there, on that one there, it's straight across one line.
Right, but we're back to the issue of that wasn't quite the correct rendering.
But, I'm looking at it as in a historical type of look, and a huge font on an awning isn't really something that you can point back at and look at pictures and say, it's that's kind of historical.
Well, I guess, Mr. Conrad brought up the color issue, but do we have any historic pictures of awnings that had print on them to give us a perspective as to how big a font something would be?
Mr. Chair, not that I'm aware of, and it's not something that we'd investigated. I mean, we could certainly look at that in the future. And having looked back at a fair amount of historic district signage to try to prepare for these kind of discussions, it really runs the gambit. You can have some communities where they don't allow any lettering at all, and you have some communities where they only allow certain fonts, which then becomes problematic because it is, as you mentioned, a trademarked logo. And then some communities have all kinds of variation. So it really boils down to, I think, what the Historic Architectural Review Board feels is appropriate as far as size and scale. I would ask the board to keep in mind that one of the issues we have is because we have on-street parking in the downtown district, it limits the visibility of wall signs and window signs and such. And so to the extent that it's of a size that's scaled properly where a motorist at 30 miles an hour can pretty quickly recognize and comprehend what the words are so that their eyes are back on the road as quickly as possible is a consideration to keep in mind as well, that you want as near instant recognition and comprehension as possible so that the eyes are on the road.
Right. I guess if we've discussed the removal of the wall sign at the top, and so again, we don't have the perspective of how big that font size for the awning is, but relative to the size of the font on Sugar Refine's sign that says cupcakes, that is fairly large font for a sign that's up on the wall, and so that's already in the historic district.
That didn't ever get approval, though. That's just Mr. Chair, the cupcakes thing is like a banner. It's It's up there.
Is
It's
it
not
banned?
really a sign, yeah, and it didn't ever come through this board. So I wouldn't want to try to make things match up to it.
Okay.
To me, the sign, I like the sign as it is, there on the drawing that she showed us there. We're trying to encourage business here in Newberry, and to me, it's on, you know. But, and the color, I don't see anything wrong with the color. I like it better. I mean, I wouldn't want to everybody have to have a pink sign over the door in Newberry, you know, advertising their business. Or, to, you know, to limit a color to businesses. I like for them to blend in, but
Yeah, I would say certainly with the rendering of it and now just covering the entryway doors, it makes it a whole lot more of an appealing idea than
well, it makes it
the
easier.
original
whenever-
drawing.
It makes it easier if you go using the businesses in Newberry when you're walking down the street and it's pouring down rain, that you can stop and rest underneath the awnings as you go down. And not all the stores here have awnings on them.
Any other comments, discussion?
I just want to make sure, you know, this is the final step, Historic Architectural Review Board. When you walk out of here, Matt Hersom is going to sign that you've got permission to build an awning of certain dimensions. Is the dimensions in the package? Does that fit the picture that you showed us, that you've designed, 69 inches, 36 inches, 108.5?
That's what it says on this drawing here.
Right.
The newest drawing that I handed you,
You know?
The newest drawing that I handed you is the one that was made
78
after they
inches
came and measured.
So that font size is only 31 inches tall and 70 inches, 80 inches linear length.
And, Mr. Chair, if the board approves this, you could also attach what was presented tonight to the resolution,
This rendering.
that rendering
Okay.
to the resolution.
Okay. Mr. Mayor.
Ma'am, are you time sensitive on this? Are you ready, gung ho, ready to go, or?
I am, because as you probably know, it's a competitive situation.
Sure.
And I need to get
Okay.
a look at the things that.
Because they've been hit with a lot of kind of differing information. I think what you're proposing to do looks a whole lot better than what's up there now. But that, you know, they've had sort of one rendering in their packet, and some things have changed tonight, and those kind of things. But if it's time sensitive, I'm sure the board's willing to sit here and continue deliberating.
And I don't want to take up all your evening time either. I
No,
can
we're here
wait.
for you.
Well, I can wait another month.
Well, I was just asking the question just so we could add it into the consideration, since there has been kind of a lot of changes here tonight. I think we can roll with those changes, but if the board's uncomfortable, rather than moving forward in a state of uncomfortableness, sometimes it's better for everybody to kind of pause and reset. But again, I would say it probably looks better than what we got there now. And I agree that as people go by fast, you want to be able to see it.
And, Mr. Chair,
Ms. Kinzer.
the attachment that's already with the resolution, we could replace that with the sheet that was provided and distributed to you tonight. So that would be your new attachment A that would actually show your awning, as far as I can tell. I mean, and have those dimensions, those would be the ones that would apply as she's shown you tonight. So that would, because it doesn't make sense to use the existing attachment A that's already there. You could just replace it. We would label that attachment A, so if that's what you'd like to do.
Mr. Boyer.
just wondering if we're ready for a motion. I'm ready to make one.
All right. At your will.
I move to approve the awning as presented on this, as depicted in this picture, with the provisions that the old sign come down.
All right. We have a motion for approval of the awning with the new rendering as to be attachment A with removal of the old wall sign.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the motion?
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely, ma'am.
Which one do you want to come down? What sign do you want to come down? That,
This one up here.
okay. I never seen that. I walk by there. I walk by there. Well, I was walking by there just to look to see if there was an awning up there, and I never did see that one up top up there, the small
Because
one
the
up
other
there.
awning blocks it out
Yeah.
from the sidewalk.
All right, we have a motion on the floor that's been seconded. Any other discussion? All right. Do we need to read the motion appropriately? We've moved and seconded, so we can just go straight to the vote. All right, all in favor of the motion of approving the awning as presented with the new attachment and removal of the old wall sign, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. All right,
Thank you for
Thank
making
you.
downtown look a little bit nicer. We appreciate you.
thank you.
Let us know if you need any help with that paint now.
All right, our next point of new business is discussion of possible text for the Historic Architectural Review Board initiated amendment to the land development regulations regarding the Certificate of Appropriateness Review and Approval process.
This is the item that you had discussed previously when we talked about applications that come before you that seem pretty straightforward, and you'd asked why they were coming before you when it really wasn't an issue that you thought needed to go before a board. So this is just some things to think about, some language that if you want to go this route, then to make it make a change to our zoning ordinance regulations, so that way the historic preservation requirements for the certificate of appropriateness for people to apply, that we could change some of those and provide for some kind of administrative certificate of appropriateness process. I have read about some of those, and this is just to look at our code now and see if it's something you'd like to pursue. And if it is, and you want to go ahead and have us initiate that on your behalf, we'll come back with the actual language for you to look at again, the actual wording for that language, and then we'll take it to the Planning and Zoning Board and then to the City Commission for their approval or consideration and whether they would like to approve it. Based on the previous discussion and what you've said in the past, we look at what's required of the Historic Architecture Review Board, and that we have that ability to present a proposal to come up with changes to the ordinance that you would recommend based on your experience as a board deciding that certain things might benefit. If we streamlined a process, in this case you were saying, to allow the Land Development Regulation Administrator to look at some of these things, that would be very straightforward. So our code actually says that the Certificate of Appropriateness goes before the Historic Architectural Review Board for any exterior changes that are visible by the public, and for any of these kinds of things, whether it's an archaeological site that's being altered, the exterior of a building, new construction, demolition, or relocation. So in looking at that, the review typically goes to this board, and then you make that decision and approve it by resolution. The other the additional way you could handle some of these applications, if you so choose, and you had mentioned having like the Certificate of Appropriateness looked at by the Land Development Regulation Administrator. So in this case, if we look at that, you would be authorizing that administrator to issue the certificate of appropriateness for minor changes. And you could have that, add requirements in there that they'd have to look at it based on certain criteria that the planning staff would have to review, and work together with the Land Development Regulation Administrator, the LDR Administrator. Your future land use plan has, in the section under the vision for the community, it talks about the Historic Architectural Review Board in the sense of the design and the kind of community that people wanted to see based on that previous visioning experience that people had when everybody contributed and the future land use element was put together and adopted. The thing with having staff review those applications, if there was any question about something, we'd want to have a provision in there to say that if anybody questioned the decision that's being made, or if the LDR administrator felt that the request was not really something that he should be deciding, we'd want to make sure it went to the Historic Architectural Review Board. Some of the types of things that I've seen that are looked at administratively in some of the other communities are like the storm windows or paint colors, and that's where Mr. Conrad was saying about if we had an adopted palette of colors, then it would be much easier, and you'd be able to say, okay, here's our list of colors that you can choose from. A lot of places have that. In the past, the city has not chosen to go that route. Just they didn't want to put that level of requirement. But as we go through with our reviewing all these items in the historic district, if you really want it to make it work and comply with the Secretary of Interior standards, or to knowing that our historic district is on the National Register and the properties within that district are a part of our heritage, that's something you may want to consider looking at the colors. But it would take some research. We want to make sure it is something that we know to be true and would be accurate. And of course, you may decide that there are certain things that you don't want in your community, and that's why in talking about some of those things in the past and looking at the future land use element when those were considered, it mostly talked about the architecture, about preserving the types of buildings that are here already, and making sure that whatever else was changed or anything new or anything that's going to be different or demolished, that we look at it in a way of how it fits into the overall district. So this is just something, I just want some direction to make sure that we go forward with this. I don't want to do this if it's really not something, if you've decided, well, we really don't want to do that. We'll just have everything come to our board, which is what we, would do under our current regulations. So, so that's where we are. Just need some direction on how you'd like to proceed. If you want to actually bring some language back before you on that, it's still something that you want as far as that administrative process, or not. So,
Mr. Conrad.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think I was the one that made the suggestion that we could make the process a little quicker for the customer in things that are routine, like putting a new roof on, removing asbestos sidings, changing out your windows. I don't think they should have to pay for public notice and wait for a month to sit through a board, things like that. I trust the staff to know what's routine and what needs a further review, and I think if you give us a menu of different things that you think you could do, you could bring it back before the board, and we could hash through it and see what things we're comfortable with letting staff approve it in the office, so the person can walk out with an approval and get back to their work. I'm ready to do that.
okay.
I don't know how the rest of the board feels about it.
Yeah, certainly, I think some of those things, as I'm looking at your list, and I realize that's not an exhaustive list, but, removal of asbestos siding, and I think maybe some of the language that say removal of siding with the provision that you replace it with an architecturally similar product,
Yes.
restoration of original features, if you can document what it
Right.
was,
Yes.
then certainly those types of things are absolutely, I would agree with Mr. Conrad, that the streamlining for our citizens and things like that would be, I think, beneficial for all involved.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all about making sure that the government is the least intrusive part of anybody's life, especially our property owners. And anything we can do to make things easier for our residents, I'm all for that. And I think streamlining this where they don't have to come before the board for everything is one of those things that is really beneficial.
If I could, are you interested in a palette of colors and having more regulations that way and bringing those before you, or would you rather not? Okay.
Yeah,
Whatever. I mean, I know that's something that you haven't-
yeah, because palette of color to me now has stepped over that line of what
True.
I like of a palette may be entirely different than what the mayor approves and now it really starts to
True.
get into choice and property use.
Yeah,
Mr.
that's
Chair,
the point is
exactly.
taken, yeah.
We could, rather than adopting an approved palette of colors, it could be something left to the discretion of the LDR administrator. And then, if somebody comes with something that I don't think is appropriate, and they always have the appeal. They, any decision made by, typically the way these are written up, any decision made by Land Development Regulation Administrator, if the applicant does not agree with that decision, they have an appeal. They could always still come to the Historic Architectural Review Board, go to that next step, seek approval from the HARB, and go that way. So even if the LDR administrator did deny something, there'll still be that appeal process.
Sure, relief for the citizens.
I know that in talking with the state, if decisions were to be made outside of this board, they felt that any color, those kind of things are really part of your ordinance. So if you're going to do that kind of thing, rather than, like you were saying, personal preference or that kind of stuff. But we can do it, as Brian said, definitely any decision that's made by the LDR administrators can be appealed to the HARB if that's what you choose to go through. I mean, I just need to know if you would like to go to that route. We will do so. So coming up with a list, an additional list that's more applicable to our community, and saying here are the kinds of things that we could look at and have our LDR administrator be the one that's making that decision, and then you can flesh that out and decide, and we'll include that kind of thing, the colors and that kind of thing, and then you can talk about it, think about it some more before the next time, and see if it is something, which things, like you were saying, you'd like to have included.
Mr. Mayor.
I like the way this conversation is going. I think the commission would thank you for streamlining. But it seems to me we're kind of having two conversations. There's the one conversation that the things that we can trust staff on, they're routine items, changing out windows, which are quick and routine. And then there's this other conversation about signs and awnings and colors and those kinds of things, which are more taste-oriented. How are we differentiating to make sure that it's fairly clearly delineated, the things that are routine and the things that are more taste-oriented? Because either one of those can kind of go south on you. It seems like I'm right on board with everything that's routine. Let's streamline that. People can pull out the asbestos. They can put on, new windows. How are we deciding what's routine and what's not routine to give the administrator this authority to make?
That's
the
a very good
decisions?
point, and I think that's well taken, and that's the idea of bringing back a list to you, because I think that the things have to be just the routine, basic. Are you changing out, the siding like we were talking about, or if you're doing a new fence, or if you're doing your awning sign, things like that. But if that's what you're comfortable with, letting the LDR administrator take and run with. But it is my understanding and my belief is that anything that you're going to have that's more subjective and that's a matter of taste that you want to outline in your regulations. If you're not going to go that route and say that, well, here's an idea, is that in our regulations we have general policies in the future land use plan that say here are the guidelines that we have for our historic district, for our community. It talks about architecture, talks about the overall look and feel of the community, but it doesn't go to the point of saying you have to do this, other than having the district itself and the designation being within that you have to comply with your historic district's requirements or the National Register, if you're on that individually, or the district itself is on the National Register, which means all the properties within that district are to be held to those standards within your own district. So to be talking about things that are that subjective, you have to make that decision. Generally, I would think you'd want to do just like the mayor is saying, that you want to do things that are more straightforward. Do I know where I'm going to change out the blinds or I'm changing my garage door, I'm changing the roof from one type of metal to the other type of metal. But there are
It
things,
seems to
that's
me
why
that
they
if you're
come to the
just
board.
restoring the original fee, so if someone comes in
same
and they
thing.
want to just replace the fence, I'm not
Right.
changing the fence at all. It just needs to be updated. That's a routine item. If they want to change the fence at all, now it becomes a matter of aesthetics, and the administrator may like the change. The historic board may say, "Who approved that?" But if you're just replacing the fence, if you're just replacing windows, it seems like there is a way to accomplish what we're trying to
Yes.
do here. I'm just pointing out that there's also a way that we can go wrong here if we give the administrator too much objective authority to say, well, I like this, so I said yes, or I didn't like that, so I said no. There's always the appeal process, but
Well, here's an
find it-
example. Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
The example of when we, you all just decided the one with the roof, where the roof was changed from the asphalt roof to the metal roof. So in that case, you were thinking, why are they coming and doing that? But because they changed the type of roof, then we said we're going to bring it forward. And then it came up the idea of, well, what color? And most people were thinking, you're just going to do the shiny metal roof. And they had a very good point about saying with the expanse and how large that roof was, they said we decided we would like to go with like a gray color. It looks terrific. Really looks really good. It's really blends in, and I wouldn't have thought, of that point about how expansive that roof was. It was going to be a big reflective horror as you drove down the road. But that's something that if it needed to come to the board, you have to just decide, do you want to be the one deciding those things? Under the certain certified local government process, the idea is that you have a board who's making those decisions, especially because some things are so subjective, because it is about a board working through things with the community and saying, okay, here's one thing that would work, here's one thing that wouldn't, we suggest this. So I think we come back with a list for you and say, here's what we think that we can do easily, and then have some information there where it's going to say if it's more subjective or it's any question about it, we'll just bring it back to you. If there's any question.
Mr. Chair, sorry, I was just going to say, this is very typical in local governments that you see that your land development administrator, sometimes called a zoning administrator, is making some of the routine decisions on issuing certificate of appropriateness, and then the larger items are coming to whichever board they've determined issue that. So
It's common.
it's very common. It's actually, I think, uncommon to not see that.
And
Right.
Mr. Chair, the point I was going to make is you would be granting the discretion within boundaries. And
Yes.
so for most of these types of things, we would have some qualifiers that would say if the application to change the garage door and the garage door falls within a certain type of historically relevant or significant or appropriate guidelines as posted by, then the LDR administrator could approve it administratively, whereas if they want to make a substantial change that you can't really identify as being historically appropriate, then the LDR, then it would be on the LDR administrator to refer that to the HARB and say, this falls outside the bounds of what I've been approved by the HARB to administratively approve, and so I'm elevating it to the HARB for their decision.
Mr. Chair, I was going to make a point that things like awnings are, the LDR should, they got an understanding of what is historical and what wouldn't be historical, as opposed to relying on just the applicant's style. You know, if an applicant wants to put a modern-looking awning on a historic house, obviously, you know, I mean, that should be shot down. So, I mean, I feel that we should give them latitude to make that decision, but on things that are major, those decisions should come before the board.
Yeah, and I would agree, and I like the idea of if some language could be put in there, if it's a direct replacement of, you know, a 6-mutton window with a 6-mutton window or something like that, that if they can demonstrate it as just literally a one-for-one change, then those types of things could be administratively approved, whereas I agree that within some of those bounds. So I'd be interested to see what kind of language we could have brought forward to make everybody's job easier, potentially. Mr. Mayor.
I would also add a final thought on this. I generally tend to think staff is more cautious because they know that if they go too far out there, you guys just bring it back on the agenda and say that didn't work out, you know. So if there's any question, they generally bring it to you, and you'll probably say, I think you could have picked that. You could have decided that one without us. But so.
And I appreciate that fact. I'd rather have them be more conservative in their decision making. All right. Anything else? All right, we will look forward to some language in the future. All right, at this point, we're at topics from members for discussion. Start with Mr. Conrad. Mr. Boyer.
It would be appropriate to remind everybody that we have city elections coming up, and we have debates for the candidates coming up this week starting tomorrow. I encourage our residents to participate, show up, listen, watch on our city our YouTube channel. But by all means, be informed.
What time
7 o'clock. It's 7 o'clock tomorrow, 7 o'clock Wednesday night, or Thursday night. Yes, 7 o'clock tomorrow for Group 1, 7 o'clock Thursday night for Group 2, and 7 o'clock Friday night for Group 3.
Ms. Hunter? All right.
And don't forget, there's our final meet and greet. This wraps up 5 chances that you've had. All the candidates have been at every single meet and greet. This one's at Woodyard Grill from 5 to 7. So candidate Baker and Coleman will have to leave a little early to get over here for the debates, but I was just over there this afternoon, worked it out with Rocky, the layout. So from 5 to 7, come to Woodyard, meet all the candidates, then you can come over here and listen to 2 candidates express their views and visions for the future city of Newberry. So, and absolutely everybody get out to vote on April 10th. We want to beat Gainesville, which had a record 13% voter turnout. I think we can definitely beat that. We can definitely beat that. So let's try.
Mr. Brian? All right. No other comments, questions, discussion? We'll adjourn the meeting.